When the smoke clears, I am the recovery plug. What's happening, man? I hope you guys are doing great today. I know my day's going just fine. Well, check this out, man. I got a little something for you guys today. So, if before we get started into the topic of today's discussion, if you please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the serenity prayer for the addict who still suffers, for those of us who are bound down to some sort of struggle that keeps us from moving forward in this toxic life that we live in. See if you would please join me in a moment of silence, please. Energy, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. All right, so now that we got that done, I want to get started by the ringing in. I said that I wanted to start doing that to get the energies right and to get the energies flowing so that we connect to those energies that are out there to help us, to guide us, to ground our mind and the energies to the here and now, so that we have a good message. So, without further ado, I'm gonna ring us in. If you would please indulge me in another moment of silence. Nam myo renge kyo, nam myo renge kyo, nam myo renge kyo. Eternal Buddha Shakyamuni, please guide us. Let us have good energies here in the session today. Thank you. Alrighty, so now that we got all the introduction out of the way, all the energies, tones, and sets that are good, okay? So what I want to do is I want to... there was something that this thing that I was watching and I was reading a couple of things this past week. I was just finishing up another book that I was reading and listened to an audio discussion about some spiritual practices of the Buddhist tradition, and this word kept coming up, and it was just something tugged at me to say, you know what, we need to talk about this word because it's a critical word. It's a word that is it's deep. It's a deep. It has a lot of meaning to it, and it has a lot of depth for a. You need understanding of this particular word in order to really elevate your spiritual practice and your recovery life. It's got a lot to do with an everyday practice of recovery and spirituality. So I was thinking, I was like, you know what, I want to dig into that word a little bit and just make it a topic because I believe it's interesting, and I believe that somebody, if I needed to hear it, I know somebody else needs to hear it. So without further ado, I'm going to get into this thing. So let me get these glasses on so I can read what I got down here on the computer. So again, the word that I'm talking about is it's called Dhyana, and Dhyana it's a Sanskrit word, and it's often translated to meditation, and it's one of the most misunderstood words in a spiritual vocabulary, if you will, and people hear meditation and they think of relaxation, they think of stress relief, or of a quiet moment, right? And but in the classic traditions of India, dhyana is something far more profound. What it is not simply sitting still, but it is the mind moving towards stillness. It is the heart becoming transparent. And it's the self-learning to see without distortion. Now, in Sanskrit, the first part of the word, the dai, it means mind. And the second part of the word, which is yana, means movement. So this dhyana is literally the movement of the mind toward clarity. You know what I mean? That's what this is, and that to me, you know, it's beautiful. And for anyone who's walking a path of recovery, you know, that movement away from the chaos and toward clarity, that's everything. You know what I mean? And not only that, but also anyone walking a path of spirituality, from being in this life of samsara, the cyclical life of suffering, and these things that we cling on to, the movement to walking a path that is of non-attachment is critical. You know what I mean? And dhyana is a big part of that. Now, you know, also there's you know, what I want to do today is you know, I want to dive into that word. You know what I mean? And see how this word that has traveled across many languages and cultures and centuries is a word that sits at the heart of awakening and also the heart of recovery. So I really want to get into that. And you know, the word dhyana is deep. It's deeper than just the meditative thing, right? It's not just a technique. It's not just sitting quietly. It's a way of seeing. It's a way of being in the here and now. It's a way of relating to your own mind in the here and now. You know what I'm saying? And, you know, for anyone that's walking that path of healing, the dhyana is not optional. It's an essential part of walking that path in spirituality and recovery. And so, you know, today we're going to explore a little bit of what dhyana really means, where it comes from, and how it works, and why it matters so deeply for life of recovery. Now, you know, again, in Sanskrit, like we said, the dai part means mind, the receptacle, the vessel of awareness that holds awareness, and the yana means the movement of this, right? So dhyana literally means movement of the mind toward clarity, right? And it's not toward distraction, not toward craving, and not toward chaos. So, but not toward any of those types of things, but it's meaning toward stillness, toward presence, and toward the truth. Now, in the Yoga Sutras, dhyana is the seventh limb of the Eightfold Path of Yoga, right? And it comes from dharana, which is concentration. Now, you know, it comes from that concentration and before samadhi, which is full absorption. So there's levels to this, right? And now, think of it like this. Think of it as dharana is when you choose a point of focus, and dhyana is when the focus becomes effortless, and samadhi is when the boundary between you and the focus dissolves. Now, Dhyana is the moment when the mind stops chasing. It starts gripping, it stops narrating, and simply just rest in awareness. You know what I mean? And in Buddhism, the Pali word jhana describes deep meditative absorptions and the states where the usual noise of the mind falls away. Now, in Zen, the word Zen itself comes from Dhyana through Chinese chant. And it points to a mind that sees clearly without the fog of craving or fear. Now, Dhyana is not zoning out. It's not spacing out. It's not escaping. Dhyana is waking up. You know what I mean? And I like these other terms that I'm throwing in there. It's all part of the mental focus and thought process of a meditative practice. Because you got to remember that this is not just talking about you in your room just sitting quietly in a lotus position, or in that little meditative time. This is talking about a daily action. This is talking about the movement of the mind to become clear throughout everything that you do in your life. It really gets the right view in action, which the right view is one of the first, the Eightfold Path. And without right view, you have nothing else. Right view is very, very important in this dhyana, because that's your driving force, I believe. You know what I'm saying? Because you can't have anything else without that right view. If you're thinking this way and it's not good, then guess what happens? You know what I'm saying? So, I like the way it described, we talked about it being a deep meditative absorption, which was a jhana, and you'll get that. You'll get those feelings, and this is what I'm talking about. If you've ever been in a meditative state and you're this happens in my personal life, okay? In my personal meditative practice, this happens only when it's a meditative session of over 30 minutes, right? Once you get to this point of the focus, you're choosing a focus. Whatever it is that you focus on, whether it's the floor, whether it's a picture, whether it's a flame, whether something in your mind, whatever it is. Personally, my focus to me is my breath. So I close my eyes and I use my breath as my focus. And after a while, you'll notice that the focus starts being effortless. You know what I mean? Whenever you're past a certain time of focus and you no longer, it's almost like you're out of the body experience in this sense. You know what I'm saying? Because when you're grounded, you're there, you're in the here and now, you are focusing on this one thing, right? So it becomes a little distracting if you got other things happening in your mind, around you, whatever. So the practice teaches you that you're in this stillness. And when you get past a certain point of the stillness, it's almost like you are out of yourself and you could see yourself meditating. Now it just becomes one. Now you're part of the energy. You know what I mean? Now you're part of this energy that picked you up because you allowed yourself to be free. You allowed yourself to be consumed by the empty space, by the energy that's there. You can't see it. You just get absorbed into it. And that is where the samadhi comes into place. When you get absorbed into it, this is deep level meditation. I'm personally not there yet, but that's where the Buddha himself woke up and became enlightened, because he came out of the samadhi, out of this deep concentration. You know what I mean? It really pretty deep meditative state. You know what I mean? So anyway, this is this dhyana is the building blocks. This is the foundation to get to that level, right? So, which is very important, because every good spiritual practice and good right view practice of anything is it needs to have a sturdy foundation that's strong. And so why Dhyana matters in a spiritual practice? Across many religions or traditions, across traditions like Hinduism or Buddhism or Jainism or Taoism, dhyana is the gateway to self-knowledge. It's a gateway to inner stillness, the gateway to non-reactivity, direct perception of reality. It's the moment when the mind becomes a mirror, not a storm. You know what I mean? And, in the spiritual practice, dhyana is the bridge between knowing the teachings and living the teachings. Now, you can read about compassion. You can talk about compassion. You can preach compassion. But the mind is still enough. But until the mind is still enough to see your own reactions, your own fears, your own patterns, compassion stays theoretical. You know what I mean? It stays, it's not in the here and now. It's not part of you yet. It's still in this fake little world, I guess, this of all these thoughts, right? Now, dhyana makes it real because it's the space where you begin to see. It's eye-opening. The clarity starts coming. The smoke starts clearing, if you will. And it's the space where you begin to see that's craving, or, that's fear, or, that's the ego, or that's a story I've been telling myself for years. You start seeing these things start coming to light and noticing that, I this is what I'm doing. And now you're aware of it. You know what I mean? Now you're not just in that everyday cyclical life. You know what I mean? There's something is stirring up in you. The seed is cultivating now. You know what I mean? So, and that seeing, in that seeing that I'm talking about, something shifts, right? You stop being controlled by the mind. You start relating to the mind. There's a big difference there, to being controlled by the mind, and then when you begin to relate to the mind, that shift is the beginning of freedom. You know what I mean? That's the shift, the beginning of that type feeling, the awareness, the liberation, right? Now, dhyana and recovery. Now, let's bring this into a world of recovery and addiction, trauma recovery, emotional recovery, spiritual recovery, whatever recovery you want to use in that, slot there. Recovery is not just about stopping a behavior, it's about reclaiming the mind. You know what I mean? That's what it's about. And really Buddhist stuff here, because if anyone knows anything about Buddhism, Buddhism is all about the mind. You know what I mean? That in any of the Buddhist texts, you're going to find out that's what it's doing. It's explaining to you how to live with a purified mind. You know what I'm saying? Because right now, our minds are full of this distorted way of thinking. We've got all kinds of things tugging at us and filling us up with all this and that. Well, in Buddhism, that's one of the foundations, it starts clearing out the delusions and the cobwebs of that mental thought process, so that you start thinking clearer in these different ways of the Eightfold Path, starting with the right view. Now, Dhyana, I believe, supports the journey of recovery in a few essential ways. Now, it interrupts the cycle of craving, that's for sure. You know what I mean? Craving thrives on agitation, reactivity, unconscious habit loops. You know what I'm saying? Those things that just keep coming because you're so used to doing them. You know what I mean? I can remember that stuff in the world of addiction. It's like, I hated getting high, but I still did it. It was just part of the routine of waking up every morning. Okay, let me smoke this. You know what I mean? And the last days was just terrible. And Dhyana trains the mind to see impulses without obeying them. That's the thing. You know what I mean? This is the heart of freedom. Now, when you sit in Dhyana, you begin to notice these things. You begin to notice, here comes the urge. Here comes the anxiety. Here comes the story that I say I can't handle this. But instead of reacting, you just watch. You just watch this thing. And in the watching, the craving loses its power. Because it's no longer leading that mental thought process at that point. You know what I mean? Now, this is why Buddhist jhana practice is historically tied to liberation from suffering. It's not mystical, it's not neurological, it's psychological. And it's spiritual. You know what I mean? Big differences and very, very deep stuff there, because if anybody who has been addicted to any sort of whatever, didn't matter what your addiction was or what you were suffering with, to be in that pattern of cyclical patterns that were, bad or dark or evil or whatever it is that you want to call it, it's a hard thing to get out of. It's a hard thing to break that cycle. You know what I'm saying? Because your mental thought process is stuck in this little whirlwind tornado of just this dark thought. You know what I'm saying? And it's not until you change that. You can't change anything else if you don't change that part. The mental part's got to get changed first. You know what I mean? Because when you start having a right view about something, it automatically draws you to what's next. You know what I'm saying? If I keep thinking about ice cream, well, then guess what my action is going to be? My action is going to be to go get the ice cream. You know what I'm saying? And that is the thought process that changes the habitual repetitious of the things that we do in the cyclical world, man. You know what I mean? Very good stuff for a spiritual practice and a practice of recovery in a spiritual and just this beautiful way of thinking about it. You know what I'm saying? It's a very different, in a sense, of a basic 12-step program. You know what I mean? And it's what I like about this Buddhist practice, is that it meshes well with everything that you do. Anything that's going on in your life, anything that you're doing, any type of spiritual practice, recovery, religious, anything, these foundational things in the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Fads, the six paramitas, they all work well in all of those aspects of your life. You know what I'm saying? You're going to find that out, but they only work if you do the work. They only work if you're involving yourself in the teachings, learning about the teachings, learning about the way of life like that, and actually putting it into practice in your life. You know what I'm saying? You can read all these books and watch all these podcasts and watch all these videos of how to and all these beautiful things that people put out there. You know what I'm saying? All these books about any kind of spirituality. There's a bunch of good information, wisdom and knowledge. But if you only do that and you don't put it into practice in your own life, you're only getting halfway there. You know what I'm saying? Half measures never avail to the full thing. You know what I mean? So, Dhyana, I believe, rebuilds the inner landscape of you. It really does. It really digs deep in there because you have to. In order to change that mental process, in order to change any habitual pattern, you have to dig deep and get the root out of there. You know what I'm saying? When you go to the dentist and your tooth hurts, they say, well, we got to get the root out. Because the root is that's the problem. You know, they can medicate your tooth all you want, but eventually they're going to have to pull it out. Eventually you're going to have to go toe to toe with the root of the problem. And that is in every part of life suffering that you go through. If you want to alleviate that, if you want that to be gone, then you have to go to the root. That's it. There's no way around that. You know what I mean? So Dhyana plays a big part in that. You know what I mean? Because it sets your right view. And that's where it starts, is with the right view. So now Dhyana, rebuilding the inner landscape of you like that, addiction and trauma often leave the mind scattered and noisy, fragmented. It leaves it distrustful of itself. You know what I mean? And I know that because I knew that if I stay anywhere for a while by myself, that I'm going to use, because that's just what I do. You know what I mean? That was the mindset. That's how my mind was programmed. You know what I'm saying? Either to go buy this and sell it and do it. You know what I mean? And do it in big ways. You know what I'm saying? I never jumped in any of those types of things when I was in the addiction halfway there. I was all the way down, man. You know what I'm saying? So I put that same type of mentality into my spiritual practice. It has gotten me many, many beautiful results. Now, Dhyana also cultivates emotional regulation, clarity, inner peace, self-awareness, contentment. You know what I mean? These are not luxuries. These are the psychological muscles of recovery. These are the things that have to be worked on in a recovery sense of a path of spirituality. You know what I mean? It's a must. You can't have recovery and spirituality in this way if you don't cultivate that. If you don't put the legwork in. And for myself, man, if I could use every single day, and I did, every single day I used. If I could use every single day, then you know what? My thought process says that I can cultivate a spiritual life, a life of recovery every single day of my life, and that's what I'm doing. And Dhyana, I believe, restores connection. You know what I mean? It's the depths of in the depths of dhyana, the sense of isolation softens. You begin to feel connected to your breath. You start to feel connected to your body, connected to the present moment. You know, connected to something larger than you. You start feeling that connection with that energy that's there, even though you can't see it. You feel connected to it. You know what I'm saying? And when your energies is where it's supposed to be, it goes into the energies of the cosmos. It goes into the energies of that divine matrix, man. And it pulls you and tugs you where you need to go. You know what I'm saying? It did me. You know, those energies pulled and tugged my mental capacity to say, hey, you know what? It's time to do something different. Take a leap and go into this Advanced Lotus Sutra study. It's going to do you good. This is the path where you need to be right now in this moment in your life. And that's what I did. And that's where I'm at. You know what I'm saying? I'm excited about that because this coming weekend, I'm going to my the Advanced Lotus Sutra study retreat, the first retreat of the journey. So I'm really excited about that. I'm going to Oklahoma City, and we'll see what happens, man. I hope I'm like a sponge now, you know what I mean? So it's beautiful stuff. Now, let me get back to this thing here. You know, in the Hindu traditions, dhyana is a means of realizing the self, which is the Atman. And it's a relationship to all beings. You know what I'm saying? There's a relationship of the self, of you, with everything else, everybody else, with all the other beings. You're connected to that. You know what I'm saying? Your energies have a certain frequency that need to be tugged a certain way. You just have to find out where that's at and how to cultivate that. To me, I believe is through the dhyana. You know what I mean? Now, in recovery, this translates to belonging, a purpose, a sense of meaning, spiritual grounding. That's very 12-step oriented stuff there, man. You know what I mean? That's why it works so well with it. I just love that. And the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. The connection, man, because in the connection is when you start, that's the groundingness. You know what I'm saying? Because now you're connected to this thing. You're connected to this energy. You're connected to this program. You're connected to this Sangha. You're connected to this community. You're connected to this program. You're connected to your brand new self of you. You know what I mean? How cool is that? Now, you know, dhyana is one of the most direct pathways to connection. And I believe that's true, man. I believe that is it is. It's just that direct path. If you know, you hear people always talking about, oh man, I wish it could happen like that. But it can't, in a sense. And that dhyana is that direct path. But it takes work. You know what I'm saying? Now, I want to talk about, just real quick, I just want to give you a quick story of this. Let me pull it up real quick. I think it's a really cool story. Now, okay. And this story is just a story that illustrates dhyana. You know what I'm saying? Now, there's a story that says, here's a story from the Buddhist tradition. A monk once asked his teacher, Master, what is the essence of meditation? The teacher replied, seeing things as they are. The monk said, but I already see things as they are. The teacher smiled and said, no, you see things as you are. That's the difference. Dhyana is the practice of seeing without distortion, without projection, without the old wounds coloring everything. In recovery, this is huge because it's so often we're not reaching to the present moment. We're reaching to the past. And sometimes to the future, but never to the present moment. You know what I'm saying? Because that present moment is always distorted with drinking another drink, snorting another line, injecting you another hit. You know what I'm saying? Or eating this, or having sex with this, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Many different things that you distort your mind with. Now, in recovery, this is huge because so often we're not reacting to the present moment, we're reacting to the past, right? And Dhyana helps us to return what is actually happening, not what we fear is happening. And that's really, it just boils down to being really committed to a new way of life, a new way of thinking. And, people always wonder, well, how do you do that? I mean, and you don't need a monastery. You don't need a perfect life. You don't need to be spiritual enough, or, all you need is breath. All you need is a moment. All you need is a willingness to see clearly. Here's a simple dhyana practice you can use on your daily life. You know what I mean? And this is just something that I'm going to throw at you here, just so it's something that you can have. You know what I mean? All you got to do is sit comfortably. Let the spine be tall but not rigid. Bring attention to the breath, not forcing it, just noticing it. Let thoughts come and go. Don't chase them, don't fight them. Let them pass like clouds. Feel the body from the inside. Let sensation anchor you. Allow awareness to widen. Let the mind become spacious. Rest in that quiet that emerges. This is dhyana. Not something you do, but something you allow. You know what I mean? When you allow yourself to be in the present moment, when you allow yourself to change that mental way of thinking, when you allow yourself to be teachable, when you allow yourself to have compassion to you, when you allow yourself to be loved, show love and be loved, that's the dhyana at work. You know what I mean? Now, Dhyana is just a beautiful thing, man. I don't know, it's not about becoming someone new. You know what I mean? It's about remembering who you are beneath all the noise, beneath all the suffering, beneath all that clutter of distorted thinking, trauma and anger and depression and grief and all of those types of things. In a spiritual practice, dhyana is the doorway to awakening. In recovery, dhyana is the doorway to freedom. Now, both paths meet in the same place. How about that? You know what I mean? That to me is the one of the key things that no matter what your spiritual path is, if you have the spiritual path and the dhyana path, they're going to meet eventually in the same spot. That is the liberation. Now, that is a mind that sees clearly. You know what I mean? That is the heart that rests. That is the life that moves from the present rather than the pain. That is the heart of changing that mental capacity, changing that thing that shifts in you. That is the start of cultivating that seed that's going to emerge the sprouting of that new person, that new mental capacity, that new way of living, the end of the suffering and pain, not that it goes away, but that you now know how to live with it in harmony. And there's a way to do that without that thing tugging you to one way or to the other way. That's staying in the middle way, the middle path. And so yeah, man. So so I'd like to just thank you guys for spending a little time with me here today, and may your practice be steady. You know what I'm saying? And may your mind be clear today, and may your recovery be rooted deep, and seeing in a deep way like that. Now, at this time, if you would please hit that subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, share the channel. I really appreciate it. That's the whole point of sharing the channel and relaying messages here, is to help the addict who still suffers, and all of those who are still bound down to some sort of trouble that keeps us from moving forward in this toxic life that we live in, because it's a lot of stuff, man. It's a lot of stuff, and a lot of people stay secluded, and they don't want to expand that mental capacity, and they stay stuck in that cyclical cycle. So, by sharing messages like this, I believe it's a good way to alleviate the sufferings of all sentient beings. And it's just one way, you know what I'm saying? And so again, if you please hit that subscribe button, I really appreciate it. Just know that when you do hit the subscribe button, you're going to be helping out another homeless person, another person dealing with PTSDs, childhood traumatic experiences, drug addiction, alcoholism, suicidal thoughts, depression, anger, grief, all of those types of things, my friends, because you know what? At one point in time in my life, I dealt with all those things. And you know what? I know a way out. And my way out could be your way out. So until the next time on When the Smoke Clears, I am the Recovery Plug. I'm going to ring us out, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Shakyamuni Buddha, thank you for guiding us and giving us these good energies. Thank you. Alrighty, until the next time, I guess we'll see you guys next time. I hope these energies has touched your energies, and may you guys have a blessed day. Thank you very much for joining me.